everybody. Welcome back into another edition of Prime Sports World. Coming to you here on a Thursday. I know this episode was supposed to go live on Wednesday, but I ended up playing basketball with this group that I play with every Wednesday night, and we ended up going long. So I didn't get home enough time to run this show. But I'm here tonight to run the show. I should be joined here by the CEO of Prime Sports World, Mr. Isabella Rivera, very, very shortly. And of course, your host, David On Point Huffman. Today's show, we're going to talk about the NBA soft seasons for all the teams that we haven't already touched on. If you watched our NBA playoff content, we basically covered the off seasons on every team as they got eliminated. So this is basically all the non-playoff teams that we have not discussed here on this show. Because believe it or not, free agency starts in a few weeks. The draft is a week from today. So the NBA off season's coming at you fast. There's very little downtime when it comes to the National Basketball Association between the end of the season, the draft, and the start of their free agency. It's not like the NFL where you got like a straight month to make decisions. Like teams are making decisions right now about their roster, and we need to talk about all of their off seasons as we cover all 14 of these teams. The only caveat is we will not be discussing the Chicago Bulls on this particular show. The Chicago Bulls will have their own dedicated show on Monday where we talk nothing but the Chicago Bulls. We're all Chicago Bulls fans here at the crossover, so we're going to talk about our team in a big way. So keep an eye out for that content if you're looking for Bulls content. That's coming on Monday. But for the rest of the teams, we're all going to touch on every single one of them. We're going to talk about their draft, talk about a little bit of their priorities when it comes to the offseason. This will be a lot quicker than those episodes that we ran during the playoffs where we spent about 5 or 6 minutes on each individual team. That will not be this show. We do not have nearly enough time to run shows like that right now. But the NBA draft, the NBA free agencies, all that stuff's coming up here soon. We're going to have another mock draft show next Wednesday. It will include a full first-round mock draft the day before the actual NBA draft, so you don't want to miss that content. And then we're going to do a full free agency preview as well, so you don't want to miss that content. And we'll give you winners and losers on Friday after the NBA draft as well. But you got not to waste too much more time. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Please also check us out on their plethora of streaming platforms. Also, I'm still a little bit under the weather, so my voice is kind of on the fritz. We'll do the best that I can, given my limitations at the moment. And hopefully somebody's going to be joining me here, sure, on the podcast and help me out a little bit. I'll even share the StreamYard link, so if anybody wants to talk NBA action, more than welcome to do so. So I don't have to sit here by myself the whole night, but it's all good. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first team, Oklahoma City Thunder. Obviously, they lost their play-in game against the Minnesota Timberwolves after they beat the New Orleans Pelicans for the opportunity to play in that game. They did not become the 8th seed. They lost that game. But there's a lot of really positive stuff to talk about here when it comes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. SGA was an all NBA player this season. Chet Holmgren is going to be returning after missing his entire rookie season. I think it was a Liz fracture that he had. Should be back to full force. They have the 12th overall pick in this year's draft. Let's talk a little bit of priorities when it comes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. As you watched in our mock draft show that we ran earlier this week, last week or was it? I don't remember what day it was, but we did an NBA mock draft. Go check that out, content. That's somewhere on our channel. I think we did it on Monday, man. It's been a week. I think. Honestly, it might have been last week. It might have been last Wednesday, actually, that we did the mock draft show. But either way, keep an eye, look out for that content. We all said that Oklahoma City Thunder needs to address their big man position. Even though Chet Holmgren is coming back, he's still more of a 4 than a 5. And I think that's probably his position moving forward in the NBA. And I also don't think you want him banging around with other bigs in the NBA, even though, the bigs aren't exactly what they used to be. I still don't think that's a good fit for Chet Holmgren. Their priorities are they got to get a big. I think otherwise they're good to go. I think at some point they're going to have to make a decision with all these draft assets because they cannot continue to add young pieces to this roster. I think eventually you want to get a veteran that'll push this team towards the playoffs. But this has been a rebuild that's gone very well. It really benefited by the fact that SGA became the centerpiece of that Paul George trade. He's been the best player in that trade by far. Paul George has been a little injury prone since he got traded. Kudos to Oklahoma City Thunder. This has been a solid rebuild. To the New Orleans Pelicans, who finished 42-40. They lost in the play-in tournament, the 9-10 matchup. Oklahoma City Thunder going up against the New Orleans Pelicans. Sorry, hold on. Oklahoma City Thunder ultimately won that game. But the big question on everybody's mind here is, can Zion Williamson can stay healthy? I think he's missed more game. Like, he's missed over a season worth of games. He's played less than, I think, like, he played less than 50% of his games as a member of the New Orleans Pelicans. And there's a lot of conversation going on in the basketball nether right now, where, like, people are talking about potentially moving off of Zion. If you could trade him for the first or second overall, or the second or third overall pick, to a Portland Trailblazers, to a Charlotte Hornets, would you do that if you're New Orleans? You get Scoot Henderson at 1 or 2, at 2 or 3, or you get Brandon Miller. I think you only make this trade if you know you're going to get Scoot Henderson. So if you're, like, on the, let's say on draft day, the Hornets take Brandon Miller, and Scoot Henderson's on the board there, would you, if you're the Hornets, if you're the Pelicans, would you consider trading Zion Williamson to the Blazers for that third overall pick, which they will take Scoot Henderson? Let's just say for the kid they have out of, I'm gonna have to look up their roster real quick. I don't have it in front of me. Just give me a second. But making a trade with Portland and bringing in obviously the big centerpiece of that trade would be being able to take Scoot Henderson on your team. Nasir Little is the guy I'm talking about, small forward, the kid from Portland. You get some, Cam Reddish, maybe another lengthy wing. You can have the opportunity to sign Jeremy Grant as well. I think you have to take it seriously. And then with the 14th overall pick, let's say you do keep that pick in this trade. It's not some sort of pick swap with Portland. Let's say you decide to keep that. I mean, Kier Lewis has been on the roster, but he hasn't been particularly all that good at the point guard position. And that's what this team has really needed. They've needed a point guard. They tried the CJ McCollum. He's really more of a 2 guard than he is a pre point. He needs to have somebody. He needs to have a point guard to run the offense for him a little bit. And it takes a little bit of pressure off CJ McCollum not to orchestrate their entire offense. I will say I wouldn't trade Zion Williamson. I think he still has a lot of untapped potential. I think he will. He was the first overall pick. He was a generational type talent when they took him only 3 years ago now. I mean, I wouldn't bail on him this early. He's a difference maker. When he's healthy and on this team, they were the best team in the Western Conference. It's not a fluke. And with the 14th overall pick, I mean, the kid from Javon Walker, Javon Walker should be there. Kason Wallace, the kid from Kentucky, should be there as well. The kid from Indiana, Hood Safino, should also still be on the board. There's a lot of good point guards that they could take with that 14th overall pick, and I think that's got to be where their priorities lie, shoring up that point guard position. To the Dallas Mavericks, who fell out of the playoffs entirely, 38-44, really was an absolute disaster after they traded for the Kyrie Irving. They were really good on offense, but on defense, they were just too poor on defense to really live up to what was a really promising season last year, where this was a Dallas Mavericks team that played in the Western Conference Finals. To not even make the playoffs the next season, that's tough. It's tough. The big question everybody wants to know is about, will Kyrie Irving stay? And if you're Dallas, would you even want Kyrie Irving to stay on this team? I think that's a legitimate debate to have, because he gives you a lot of good stuff on the offensive end of the basketball court, but he's a liability on the defensive side of the ball, especially since you traded 2 fairly good in Dorian Finney-Smith and Dorian Finney-Smith for sure, one of the best wing defenders in the NBA. You could trade him for Kyrie Irving. Spencer Dinwiddie, Spencer Dinwiddie, pretty solid defender as well. I don't know what Kyrie Irving's going to end up doing. I know there's a lot of smoke about the Phoenix Suns right now with the potential trade swap for him before that June 30th deadline. I just don't know what they're going to do with Kyrie Irving. And I don't really know if they want to they should probably bring him back, because they don't have an opportunity. Like, let's say Kyrie Irving walks from the Dallas Mavericks. Like, they're not bringing in somebody else to replace him. Like, they're over the cap. They don't have free agent. They don't have cap space. They can't bring in. Like, they're not just going to sign somebody else with the cap space that Kyrie Irving would be fighting for leaving. They're so much over the cap that they basically have no choice but to re-sign him or orchestrate some sort of sign and trade. Where they get a D'Angelo Russell back from the Los Angeles Lakers, if that is a route that the Lakers decide. I mean, the Phoenix Suns, if you get a Chris Paul back in a sign and trade as well, that's something that could be interesting, could be talked about, could be looked at. But I think, bringing Kyrie Irving has to be has to be an opportunity here. Another thing that they could potentially look to do is what TJ brought up in our mock draft is they have the 10th overall pick in this year's draft. I mean, they did a mini tank job towards the end of the year there to secure that 10th overall pick. If you didn't know, if it fell outside of the top 10, this pick would have been going to New York as part of the Kristaps Porzingis trade 5 years ago now. Man, we're getting old. Maybe even longer than 5 years, to be totally honest with you, because I know they drafted him to partner him up with Luka. That obviously didn't work out all that well. But they could essentially try to trade this 10th overall pick for somebody who's a difference maker on this team, maybe even a Zach LaVine, like TJ mentioned, who would be a really nice Batman, a Robin to Luka's Batman. Another thing that they need a wing, an athletic wing. They have a decision to make with Christian Wood if they're going to bring him back or not. But there's a lot of question marks here when it comes to Dallas Mavericks. And also, this is a team that needs to be competitive. Luka is one of those new age stars. I know he's international, and they don't usually ask for trades. They don't really try to push. But I think you want to put a good product on the floor as long as Luka is still in his prime. That's got to be a priority if you're the Dallas Mavericks. So we'll see what ends up happening. There are other priorities. They need to get a legitimate big. I know they signed JaVale McGee this most recent offseason. That did not work out in the least because he barely played. They have a Christian Wood decision to make because he is going to be a free agent this offseason. And they have the 10th overall pick, which they could use to get some shooting on the other side of Luka Doncic, with the team that always could use some shooting. I know I drafted Grady Dick. Shooting guard, small forward out of Kansas, could be a compliment of places to that Dallas Mavericks roster. And then finally on this graphic, we got the Utah Jazz, who started the season out very promising. Was at one point, I think, in the number one seed in the Western Conference, consistently slid back and back and back until they eventually fell out of the playoffs race entirely. 37-45, but they have $1 million draft picks to their disposal as part of the Rudy Gobert trade and part of the Donovan Mitchell trade. They also got some pretty nice assets in that trade. Lauri Markkanen really panned out into most improved player of the year award. He's a guy that played really like what we thought he'd play in Chicago, taking people off the dribble, shooting the three. Was a good basketball player. Can he do that again? I think he can. I think that this isn't going to be a one-year wonder where Lauri Markkanen's only good for this one particular season. It's not like he was playing for a contract or anything. He was just playing to play good basketball, and he for sure did that this season. So shout out to Lauri Markkanen, played well this season, most improved player of the NBA. I don't maybe he won't be necessarily an all-star again, but we'll see what ends up happening with his career. But I do think he can contribute these type of numbers again for sure. As I try to pull them up, it's hard running a show solo because I try to look stuff up, but I can't do it while I'm doing something else. So his season jump from last year to this most recent season. So in 2021 in Cleveland, he played 61 games. He averaged 14.8 points a game. 6 rebounds basically. And then this most recent season, he played in 66 games. They did shut him down towards the end to avoid him getting injured if they do want to decide to trade him, which his value probably couldn't be higher now than it's ever been. But 26 points per game, basically 9 rebounds a game. He added a basic assist per game as well, while not committing any extra fouls and not turning the basketball over more than what he did as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers, is a non-focal point of that offense. So shout out to Lauri Markkanen. It just shows if you continue to work on your craft, you can do a lot of things in the NBA. So good kudos to him, my friend. To the 9th overall pick, they don't have any glaring holes on this roster. I mean, you could make the argument they could still use a legitimate power forward. The only one on their roster right now is Kelly Olynyk and Rudy Gay, and both of those guys are not franchise. They're not centerpieces. Like they're not part of the bigger picture when it comes to the Utah Jazz. Jordan Clarkson has been on the trade block basically ever since they traded Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert away. So it'll be interesting to see what they have with him. Colin Sexton, not a great season for him. I think he, 14.3 points. I think he kind of struggled adjusting, and he only played 48 games this season. So look for him to get healthy. I know he's coming off of, I think it was like an ACL tear the season before. So it was good for him to even get on the floor, but he still needs a lot of work. And The possibilities are really endless when it comes to, because the THT they still have in this roster could be a valuable trade chip if they decide to flip him. Udoka Azubuike is a good center. Walker Kessler was I think first team All NBA when it came All Rookie, was really good for them. Was really a steal for what he basically gave you Rudy Gobert numbers without getting paid like Rudy Gobert. So that was a pretty solid get there for the Utah Jazz. Their priorities is to continue to acquire talent, acquire assets, make this team as good as you can. Because you have so much future draft capital. It's just like kind of mind-boggling. I think they got 3 first-round picks from 4 first-round picks from Minnesota. They got some pick swaps in there. They also have, 3 first-round picks in the Cleveland Cavaliers as well. So they basically have a treasure trove of draft assets, and they have some players that teams are going to like Jordan Clarkson's a good player. I mean, Lauri Markkanen, somebody they could decide to trade. Kelly Olynyk's a veteran, can shoot. Rudy Gay is probably at the tail end of his career. THT is also somebody who was interesting when he was a Laker a few years ago, but he's kind of bounced around the league the last couple seasons. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. Also see what happens with the Utah Jazz, as they were 37-45 this most recent season. And we'll see what happens with them when it comes to their offseason, as we will do a recap of every team's offseason as we get through them. Moving on to the other Western Conference team. We got 3 others. First, we got the Portland Trail Blazers coming in here at 33-49. They were the 3rd worst team in the Western Conference last season. They also were a team that got off to a really good start and then just kind of tapered off as the season went on. I think especially since like Damian Lillard got banged up a little bit. Jeremy Grant actually is quiet as a cat. Had a really solid season for the Portland Trailblazers. Sorry, my internet's having a moment right now. So I'm having a little hard time pulling up their roster and their stats. It's all right. But yeah, quiet as a cat. I think, Jeremy Grant had a really solid season. I know he's a free agent. They're probably going to want to try to keep him or figure out some way that they can, maybe move him in a sign and trade of some sort. I'm just, hold on a second. I apologize again. I try to pull up the Trailblazers. Anyways, but yeah, they also, so we'll talk about the big thing. A lot of players that people are talking about in the NBA world is the potential for a Damian Lillard trade that could come this offseason. He's been the stark guy who's like, oh, I'm going to be loyal to Portland, and I'm not gonna force my way out of here. But I think the more that this has gone on, where Portland hasn't been competitive, I don't think they made the playoffs in the last 3 seasons. And ever since that season that they made it to the Western Conference Finals, they have really been semi-irrelevant in the Western Conference. That's for sure. But I think this could be the season. Also, welcome to the show, Mr. Israel Rivera. We are talking about the Portland Trailblazers. Talking about Damian Lillard. Is this the offseason where the Damian Lillard trade is looming? Do you think this will be the offseason where they kind of pull the trigger on that finally, as we're talking about their offseason preview?
Hold on, Dave. I'm having some audio technical difficulties here. Hold on 1 second here. I think I heard you a little bit. I think I heard you a little bit about Damian Lillard being traded.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, so let me take these out. I think Damian Lillard will get traded this offseason. And I think I got a team, actually. I'm actually going to go with the Miami Heat that Damian Lillard gets traded to. But there will be, a few teams. He's mentioned he wanted to play with Mikal Bridges in Brooklyn, Bam Adebayo in Miami. And also Godly, who was the third person that he mentioned?
You know what? I cannot remember off the top of my head right now.
There's
Joel Embiid and Joel Embiid.
I don't believe it was Embiid. Man, if TJ was on here, he'd.
I can't. I literally cannot pull up.
It's on the tip of my tongue. But anyways, there's 3 destinations that he really probably wants to play. Probably. He'll end up in Phoenix. Who knows? But it's got to be for the right trade package, because, getting Damian Lillard is no cheap feat or easy feat, right? So you're talking about draft compensation. Your team's definitely their best player. So if Miami was, looking to get Damian Lillard, which they do need a superstar to pair up with Jimmy Butler, I do think that Tyler Hero
So
will be
he
gone.
said New York Knicks and Boston Celtics along with
The
Miami
Knicks
Heat.
and the Celtics, yeah. Oh, and on the Celtics, I mean, it would be a tough team to beat, right? Damian
Oh,
Lillard,
be tough,
but you're
real
gonna
tough.
have to pair. You're gonna have to get rid of, it's not gonna be Tatum, so it'll be Jaylen Brown.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean,
Marcus
we'll see what
Smart's
ends
in
up
that
happening, but
package.
I think that this is probably the off season where we see Damian Lillard finally playing in a different jersey next season.
Yes.
And then we talk about the third overall pick. Like, what should be the priority? I kind of touched on this a little bit on the Pelicans segment, but like, if the Pelicans are legitimately thinking about trading Scoot Henderson for this pick, like Zion Williamson for this pick, would you make that trade if you're Portland? It would probably require you to give up some of your other assets as well. Like Anthony Simons would probably have
Lillard to stay. Can
Yeah.
you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you before.
You can hear me now? Oh yeah, no, it's no, finally my earphones are working now. But yeah, I think Zion healthy, there's gonna have to be some conversations met
yeah.
with Zion Williamson for the third pick, right? So because Scoot Henderson, allows, that makes sense for the Pelicans, because you put Scoot at point guard. He's a franchise chasing point guard. He's the most athletic point guard probably since Derrick Rose. His game is very comparison to that. And then they Brandon Ingram's been healthy. They got a bunch of role players. And then you still got CJ McCollum. So you're looking to become perimeter orientated, but at least you're getting the point guard that can make a difference.
They have a center on that team. Like, they don't necessarily need. Like, they have Valanciunas is still on that team.
Big Val, baby.
Yeah, but let's swing back into Portland. Let's talk about Portland. Get back over to Portland. With the third overall pick, if they don't end up trading it for a Zion Williamson type, I think Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller, whichever one of those guys falls to them, they're in a position where they'll just take whichever one of those three guys are available when it's all said and done. And what do you think there should be their priorities this offseason? Should the trading of Damian Lillard be one of their priorities, or should they continue to try to build around him?
So I think if you're landed with Scoot Henderson with the third overall pick, because obviously you're gonna go with one of the Thompson brothers. I forget which one. I think it's Amen Thompson. That's the point guard, more of the point guard distributor. So correct. If you end up with Scoot Henderson, I mean, maybe there's even if you can get you can persuade Dame to stay. You still got Grant there. Yusuf Nurkic.
So Grant is going to be a free agent. He's going to need a new contract.
Yeah, new contract. So, but my thing is, what about the young boy, the other point guard, shooting guard, Anthony Simons? What if you find some value for him, getting something back? If you can get,
I'm just not sure what his value is. I'm just not sure what his value is. If I'm Portland, I'm probably going to rebuild. I think I'm going to try to move Damian Lillard. I think this is a perfect opportunity to just kind of blow this up. Is I mean, I'm not sure what you can really do. Even if you add a Scoot Henderson to this roster, it doesn't make them better next season. I think Damian Lillard has been loyal, and I think it's time for him to move on. From there, let's talk about the Houston Rockets. 22-60 last season, second best record in the NBA. Let's talk about the rumor that's been swirling around the NBA Basketball Association. Will or should they sign James Harden? Yes or no? Will they and should they? It's a double part question. Will they and should they?
Well, anytime I think. I don't know if they should, but I mean, adding James Harden with all that young talent, I mean, you already seen what he could do without as much talent in Houston when he had it, when he was there. So I would say they will trade for James Harden, and they should trade for James Harden. Absolutely. He puts the kids in the seats. I mean, he puts the fans in the seats. He's going to raise your franchise value. He's going to put the fans in the seats. Nobody on Houston's putting. Who's putting the fans in the seats?
It's true. I think they will sign James Harden. I think when there's usually smoke, there's usually fire. But I don't think they should. I don't think he's going to be beneficial to those young players. I just don't think he'll take touches away from Jalen Green. He'll take touches away from Albert and Sengun. He'll take touches away from Jabari Smith. I wouldn't. I think they will sign him, but I probably wouldn't if I was the front office of the Houston Rockets. But I'm not, obviously. Moving over to the 4th overall pick, they kind of got shafted by the draft lottery, fell out of the top 5 or fell out of the top 3, fall to the 4th overall pick. Probably should be trying to move off of Kevin Porter Jr. at the point guard position. Hasn't really worked out there. So I could see them going point guard. Amon Thompson will probably be the guy they take. What do you think their strategy should be going into the draft?
Definitely take best player available, because that team needs a lot, right? You already got Alperen Sengun. You already got Jabari Smith. Kevin Porter Jr. Yeah, you're right. I mean, at this point, you're going to draft a guard in this draft. So he's pretty expendable unless he wants to come off the bench and be a 6-man, which I don't think in his young career he wants to do that. So I think, with that, 4th overall pick, you got to go best player available. Because I mean, you already got your front court pretty much set of the future.
Yeah.
I mean, Alperen Sengun looks like a really, good player, like good young player that they can build. And Jabari Smith, we already know, his intangibles, his shooting range. He's another good young prospect of a player.
I think he could take the next step. Pretty rocky rookie season, but I think
rocky rookie season. But he's got a lot of time. I mean, you got to think about it.
I mean, he's 19.
Rookies, 19. Not all rookies. Have a great season that first year. They go through some bumps. So I think he's a guy that has a young career ahead of him. So yeah, got to go with Amon Thompson here, and probably KPJ gets traded here in the draft.
Maybe. Let's talk priorities. If you're Houston, what should be your priorities this offseason? I think it should just be continuing to acquire talent. I wouldn't, unless you could trade for Jaylen Brown. That's the only veteran I would bring in. I wouldn't bring in James Harden. I would just continue because they have draft capital, they have draft assets. I would literally just continue just requiring young talent and just continue building this roster and taking swings at the fence, and eventually going to hit on somebody who's going to work out. The verdict's still out there on Jalen Green.
I like that. I like that. I like that a lot, what you just said, because that Jaylen Brown is really who they should go after and who they really should give money to, because you're already going to have, 2 point guards that, pretty much guys that can get their own shot and distribute. So, I do agree. Just continue to get better, right? That, young team, didn't, respond well to, the Silas. So hopefully respond well to their new head coach. So yeah, the Houston, Rockets just continue to get better, continue to stockpile talent. They'll probably be in the top 5 again.
Moving over to the San Antonio Spurs, 22-60. They have a plethora of young talent on this roster. They had 3 first-round picks in the most recent draft. I literally cannot pull up any websites on the internet right now. So I cannot pull up their roster in front of me, but they're obviously going to have Victor Wembanyama with the first overall pick. So what do they do with their young talent? I have seen some rumors that they want to trade Devin Vassell to try to get an additional first-round pick in this year's draft. I'm not necessarily sure I would do that. I think I would hold on to some of those young players. But the question remains, what do you do with all the young players on this team? What should the priorities be on the San Antonio Spurs? Obviously, Victor Wembanyama is going to be a Spur. You want to put him in the best place to be successful. So what are you looking to do if you're a Spurs?
I'm pulling up their depth chart too right now. That's another team. Obviously they're gonna get Victor Wembanyama, right? Obviously they're gonna they got a lot of young talent. Jeremy Shoshan. You got the Malachi what's his name? Malachi Brandon still there. Kelvin Johnson,
Trey Jones, Devontae Graham. Bates Diop, Keldon Johnson, who played on Team USA. Romeo Langford has been kind of disappointing since he got in the NBA.
Zach Collins,
Blake Leslie was a first-round pick last year.
Doug McDermott.
Yeah, none of those guys are young anymore, but your point's still.
Zach
stands.
Collins and Doug McDermott should be a lot better than what the hell they are right now, right?
I mean, I guess.
Especially Zach Collins, right?
He can't stay healthy to save his life, but
he can't stay healthy to save his life. Yeah, so obviously you're getting Victor Wembanyama. I think this team should, right now, they shouldn't try to suck. They should try their hardest to make the playoffs instead of trying to tank and trying to get through those. Because I think that talent there now in San Antonio, just they got to learn how to win now. I think also adjusting to Coach Popovich. I think if Pop doesn't really get them to where the franchise sees them, going, I think that it could be the last years of Coach Popovich, because with a guy like Victor Wembanyama and all those young talent, you don't know if they're gonna buy into the Greg Popovich San Antonio Spurs way, right? So you want to continue to build that team with a young, run roster, and if it's time for Greg Popovich to just have a front office role, then I'd go the young route and have that coach grow with that team. I mean, they got a plethora of guys on that bench that are willing to step up and be.
And they have future draft capital. I mean, they have that first round pick from the Chicago Bulls as part of the DeMar DeRozan trade. They have all those picks.
Add a couple veterans.
And they added all those picks that came from the Atlanta Hawks in the DeJounte Murray trade. I mean, but straight up, if you just take, like, let's replace Deck Collins in their starting lineup with Victor Wembanyama and Jeremy Sochan, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, and Trey Jones. Like, that should be a starting five that should win some games. Team. I wouldn't. That should be
a play-in team, David. A play-in team. They should be where OKC is.
Yeah, but they should just make sure that this roster's in a place where they can. Victor Wembanyama doesn't start his career off losing games regularly. Like, I think they want to have us. They want to set this up where he's going to win some games his first season.
Yes.
Moving over from the Western Conference, we're going to talk about the Eastern Conference. Obviously, the Chicago Bulls up there on the graphic, 40-42. We will be doing a full Bulls show on Monday.
Nobody wants to hear about them anyway.
So we'll talk about the Chicago Bulls then. We're not going to talk about them right now. But obviously, they have no first round pick in this upcoming draft. They finished 40-42. They lost to the Miami Heat in the second round of the play-in tournament. Let's talk about the Toronto Raptors. 41-41. It feels like a team that's going in a changing of transition potentially, as Fran VanVleet's already opted out of his money. Now what? They have the 13th overall pick. They obviously fired Nick Nurse and hired the dude from Darko Radovacic, I think is his way.
Yeah.
So they are in a bit of a transition. OG Anunoby, last year of his deal. Pascal Siakam, last year of his deal. Scotty Barnes didn't take that leap from year 1 to year 2 that many had expected. So what are we expecting? So what should be the priorities here for Toronto?
Toronto just hired 2 assistants, one from the Warriors the Warriors assistant and the Wizards old assistant coach. So, and the Warriors assistant Jama Mahali is going to be their top assistant coach. Anyways, the Toronto Raptors, Fred VanVleet is probably just doing this to see if he can get more money out of Toronto or if he can just get more money elsewhere, which I think elsewhere is going to be where it happens. I think Toronto is probably going to go in a different direction and try and move forward with what the NBA is going forward with, and that's a taller guard, 6'5", 6'6". On the regular, you're facing 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" guys at the point guard position. When you got to face Tyrese Halliburton, when you got to go against SGA, when you got to go against a guy like De'Aaron Fox, Fred VanVleet is a good offensive player. He's a great role player, but he is not I know he went to the but he is not a guy that can stay in front of those guys, 6'6", 6'5", LaMelo Ball. I mean, think about all the tall point guards in this league that Fred VanVleet kind of has trouble guarding, even though he's a nice, compact size. He's got a great offensive game, but I think some other team is going to give him money. He'd be perfect on a plethora. I could name a plethora of teams like New Orleans, Philadelphia. A plethora of teams would use his services. Just because they have other players that can offset his, size.
I think that they can replace him in the draft per se. Like, I think they could draft a point guard who's going to be one, cheaper, and B, probably gives you like 80-90% of what Fran VanVleet gives you this past season. I think the priorities this season for the offseason for the Toronto Raptors is I think they just have to figure out what they want to do with this roster. Like, if they're gonna let Fred VanVleet walk, that's got to be the end of this era of Toronto Raptors basketball, which means Pascal Siakam should be out the door, which means OG Anunoby should be out the door. Like, any of those leftover pieces from that Kawhi Leonard championship, should be moved. And that
I
should be
thought
their
that OG
priority.
Anunoby was going to get moved this past deadline.
I thought so too, but I think their opinion on him is very high, and I don't think they're just going to let him go. But we'll see.
What is Pascal Siakam's? I mean, he's kind of fizzled.
I don't know. I mean, he was
Kawhi Leonard
really,
left.
I mean, he was really good this past season. He arguably could have been. Was he an all-star? I think he was an all-star this past season, right? Or could it was one of the snubs?
An all-star? Was he Spicy P an all-star?
I don't know, but he was very good this season, and I think as a team that could use a Pascal Siakam as a complimentary scorer, I don't think he can be the best player on a championship team or even a playoff team anymore at this point. But I think he can be the for sure number one, number two guy on a championship level team. I think he still has some value, and if I'm Toronto, that's got to be my priority. If I'm going to let Fred VanVleet,
he did come back a little bit.
Yeah,
he came back. He was an all-star this year. But yeah, no, I do agree with you on that. I think if Fred VanVleet's gone, you got to try and get something for Pascal Siakam, and try and just rebuild this team with a young head coach.
Moving on from them, let's
keep
talk
Scotty Barnes though.
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't think. Moving on from them, we got the Indiana Pacers on the board. They finished the season at 35-47 after they had a very promising start to this basketball season as Tyrese Halliburton, first-time All-Star for the Indiana Pacers. And they also extended Miles Turner at some point during this season, so took him off the table when it came to trade deadline moves. But let's talk about him again. Do you think this will be the offseason we see Miles Turner or Buddy Hield traded this offseason? Yes or no?
Man, I think that both could be explored to get traded. I think both should probably get traded, especially Miles Turner. I think that's the guy that you can get the most value for right now.
Well, I mean, shooting is always,
and also
I think if I had to pick one of those two guys, I think it's Buddy Hield is probably has the better chance of being traded. I think the Pacers like the Halliburton Turner combination, and I think they're gonna try to keep that together for a little while. See how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, they were in some good close games last season, but
because it all really fell apart for them. I think it all really fell apart for them. Like when Halliburton went out for I think it was 15 games, and that's when basically the season fell apart at that point. Moving on from their draft, let's talk about they have the 7th overall pick. They have done pretty well with drafting over the last few seasons. With Chris Duarte last year, who was solid. His rookie season kind of wasn't all that good this past season. Then they had Benedict Mathurin,
sophomore ball.
Played pretty well for big spurts of this season. He kind of tapered off towards the end of the season as well. But they have the 7th overall pick. What are you trying to do if you're Indiana with that pick?
Man, I think you have to, probably go with a power forward here. Somebody that can stretch the floor along with Miles Turner. Somebody that can open up those lanes for Tyrese Halliburton. Even though Tyrese Halliburton can, shoot it. Can shoot it over the top as well. So, I mean, I'd go either with Jarris Walker from Houston or I forget the kid's name from UCF who I really like, who I think has a lot of
Jenkins.
Is it Jenkins? Who I think has a lot of pick and pop potential, especially from NBA range. I think he can shoot it.
Taylor Hendricks is his name.
Taylor Hendricks, yeah, and he's got I think close to a 7-foot wingspan or 7'1" wingspan, something like that. So I think I like the potential of Taylor Hendricks or Jarris Walker. You can't go wrong with either or. But if you're going to keep Miles Turner, pair him up with a good 4. But I think right there in the draft, I mean, you already have your Benedict Mathurin. You already have Tyrese Halliburton, Chris Duarte, Buddy Hield there, especially if you're going to keep him. So your backcourt's pretty nice. But I mean, you can also go get other guys, other guards that are going to be available in the draft at that early juncture. So
moving on from so other priorities, I think just acquiring more talent as we kind of feel like broken records here, but the Indiana Pacers just need to continue to acquire more talent, and I also think they need to move off of Buddy Hield this offseason. I think that's got to be a priority. From there, let's talk about the Washington Wizards. Pretty disappointing season for the Washington Wizards at 35-47, coming off of a pretty solid season from KCP and Kyle Kuzma, who are both going into free agency this offseason. Bradley Beal, he's been just swirling in trade rumors ever since, really, for the last 4 years, really, since they traded away John Wall and he got injured, and the team has really been floundering since then. They get it at the 8th overall pick. Let's talk Bradley Beal. Do you think that there's going to be a trade? I know that they've already said they're going to talk about moving him and finding a destination for him. But do you think that's just kind of just talk? Because Bradley Beal has that trade clause.
No trade clause. Yeah. I think if they could find the right trade, it's all about he's in a rare air, right? Bradley Beal. I mean, how many guys get that no trade clause?
I mean, he's only like the 5th player in the history of the NBA to have it.
So he determines what situation he wants to go to. So if the Miami Heat, come with a great trade package, I think Bradley Beal says, hell, and they're like, hey, Miami wants to go. We want to pull the deal. I think Bradley Beal says yes to that because that's a team that just went to the NBA Finals.
The other thing that could really hamper Wizards' ability to trade him, let's say he wants to go to Miami, but he looks at the trade package. He's like, you know what? If you trade me there for that package, there won't be much left for me to play with when I get there. I don't think that's not going to work for me. Like, that's one of the things that's one of the things, because he has a full no trade clause. Like, if he doesn't like the package that, let's say that he thinks the Heat are giving up too much, he can just nix the trade just from that alone. Even if it's somewhere he wants to play.
I don't think the Heat are going to give up.
No. I'm just talking about in generals. Like, if that.
In general, well,
yeah.
I mean, he's gonna look at the roster. He's gonna say, "I got Jimmy Butler. I got Bam Adebayo." But they're not trading neither one of those guys. And the other guy that makes the money work is Duncan Robinson. He's gonna be like, "Oh, well, I still got Kyle Lowry here coming off the bench. I still got Martin coming off the bench,
right? Derrick Rose.
Thank you. I love Derrick Rose on the Heat, baby. And then you got Max Strus, who could also shoot it. And then you can always get a guy like the way Heisman played in these playoffs. So in the season in general. So I think Miami, I think Bradley Beal will be okay as long as Bam and Jimmy are still on the team.
I
don't think Miami's giving up too much.
I think Bradley
he's
Beal
not gonna lose sleep over Tyler Hero and
Bradley Beal,
Duncan Robinson.
Bradley Beal will not be on the Wizards on opening night. I don't know where he's going to be playing,
but
he won't be on this team. He's either going to be in the Miami Heat or the Philadelphia 76ers, wherever makes sense. Let's talk about their draft. They got the 8th overall pick. They have absolutely been one of the worst drafting teams in the NBA. They swung and missed on Johnny Davis last draft. None of the players that they personally have drafted, like Rudy Hachimura, Devin Avdija, none of those guys have really worked out in a big way. Like, they've literally have just swung and missed. Like Corey Kispert, they took last year, didn't pan out either. So they've been a pretty bad drafting basketball team outside of getting John Wall and Bradley Beal. Everybody else has just kind of been kind of trash since they've. So what should they do with their 8th overall pick, and what should their priorities this offseason be outside of trading Bradley Beal away?
Well, I think with the 8th overall pick, I mean, you got some ways to go. I mean, they still like you said, they got Corey Kispert. They're gonna have Kristaps Porzingis.
I mean, he's a free agent this offseason.
I mean, I think they should sign him back, though.
I think so too.
Else, what else are they gonna?
I mean, talking priorities, I think they should priorities re-sign Kyle Kuzma and
Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get him, and Kyle Kuzma.
Yeah, and Kyle Kuzma. So, I think, and my computer's going slow here. I think with that draft, I mean, Anthony Black makes sense. If a guy like Jordan Hawkins is there, but I think they're going with a taller point guard. So a guy like Anthony Black, or maybe
Jalen Hood-Schifino if he's still there. I mean,
Jalen Hood-Schifino if he's still there, which he should still be there. So they got some different options that they can go for the Wizards, but I think they do add a point guard for them. I mean, we still don't know what Johnny Davis is like, right? We still don't even know what he's made of. So, hopefully, but if any of those guys are interchangeable, Anthony Black, Jalen Hood-Schifino, I think they should still be able to play. They're still big guards, but I mean, I go guard, maybe forward, maybe a combo guard. You got to, if you're gonna trade Bradley Beal, get a guy that can, shoot it, that's a 3-level scorer. I like Smith from Arkansas, who's a 3-level scorer. Keontae George is a 3-level scorer. They're not going to replace the shooting of Bradley Beal. I think Grady Dick could do that, but they can go.
Yeah, but he doesn't
point guard,
have
shooting
the ball
guard.
handling intangibles.
He does not have. I'm not going to compare Grady Dick at all, David. No, not at all.
But
not at all
I think the number one priority for the Washington Wizards this offseason is to get out of that Bradley Beal contract. They never should have given it to him in the first place. They should have traded him 3 seasons ago. To the real bottom half of the Eastern Conference, we have the final 3 teams. We got the Orlando Magic first at 34-48 with a plethora of young talent. They also have 2 first-round picks in this year's draft at 6 and 11. Let's talk about how they should approach the draft. Do you think that this should be a team that adds 2 more young players, or should they look to move either both of these picks or one of these picks to try to see if they can acquire somebody who's already established, because they have a lot of young players already on this team?
Man, they could move these picks. I mean, you got the 6th and you got the 11th from the Bulls.
Yep.
Oh my God, man. Orlando's got to make the playoffs someday. I mean, what do you move these 2 picks for? Are you trying to move these 2 picks for the 2nd overall or 3rd overall to get Scoot Henderson?
I'm not sure.
One of them to move up? What are you trying to do here?
I'm not sure that would be enough. Like, if I'm Orlando, I'm like testing the waters. I can't think of anybody who I know would be available. I mean, if you could get Pascal Siakam on this team, or even as an OG Anunoby, maybe trade away. I don't know. I think Orlando. If Orlando,
who you trading away? You trading
6 and 11
on Orlando.
I mean, 6 and 11. I mean, maybe you have Jonathan Isaac, who's still a big contract. I think a team
maybe maybe Jonathan Isaac.
Teams will take a flyer.
What about Cole? What about Cole Anthony? Cole Anthony is a guy that can.
Another guy.
Or you can trade those 2 picks away with Cole Anthony.
But I think it's time for the Orlando Magic to stop just acquiring young talent, and eventually they have to make that young talent move in the right direction so that they are a playoff team. Like, this has to be a playoff team next season. They can't continue
you still got Wagner. You still got Banchero.
You still got Jalen Suggs is on this roster too.
Who's coming off the bench?
Markelle Fultz is on this team.
Markelle Fultz. I mean,
Wendell Carter Jr. is on this team. They have Bol Bol who's on this team.
So if you can add a guy, If you
can
add a guy like Pascal Siakam,
this is the team that make a whole lot of sense for Bradley Beal. Like, you're like, hey, Washington, we'll give you 6 and 11 and some stuff, and we give us Bradley Beal. I think he would veto. I think he would.
11, Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony or something. I don't know. Jalen Suggs and maybe Jonathan Isaac.
And we'll give you a first 2 years from now. I think Bradley Beal
top 10 protected.
I think Bradley Beal would nix that trade, but I think that'd be an interesting conversation to have.
I'm trying to go there with a bunch of knuckleheads.
Yeah. Priorities for Orlando, I think that we kind of touched on already. This has to be a offseason where they move towards making the playoffs. I think we're all tired of the what ifs, could have, should have, would have when it comes to the Orlando Magic. They need to put pen to paper and make this a team that makes the playoffs next season. Acquiring young talent is nice, but it's only going to take you so far. From there, let's talk about the Charlotte Hornets. And I had a hard time coming up with storylines that I thought were interesting for the final 2 teams. But first of all, Charlotte Hornets, 27-55. One of the things that I think is interesting is they have the 2nd overall pick. Many people expecting to take Brandon Miller. But outside of LaMelo Ball on this team, what is a positive about this roster? Like, who's a piece that you're like, yeah, that's a good. I like that guy a lot. I just don't think that guy exists.
Nobody. LaMelo Ball, like you said. Nobody.
I don't think that guy exists. And like, what do you think the odds are that Miles Bridges finds his way back on this team this offseason?
I think Miles Bridges does come back next year. So that's gonna be interesting. He got suspended for a whole year.
He never got suspended.
I mean, well, whatever. Internal suspension. They didn't play him. So that's basically an internal suspension.
He never signed it. He's been a free agent this entire year.
Oh, that is true. Forgot about that.
But he basically got suspended without actually being suspended.
basically, because nobody picked him up, and
Yeah,
somebody
and
should have picked him up.
he was like damaged goods, like nobody was going to touch him. But I think this is the season where he returns. I think
Absolutely.
the memory of the people is pretty short. I think people are willing to forgive and like let people let your actions show that you deserve remorse. I think after not getting paid for an entire year, I think that's probably punishment enough. I do think if Adam Silver, if he does sign, I think like some sort of suspension will come, just because the NBA has to do
And
their due diligence. But I also think they have some trade chips here. I mean, Terry Rozier has been around in trade rumors forever. I think this
Gordon
is
Hayward,
Gordon Hayward, another guy, PJ Washington,
yeah,
because they don't
maybe
have. There's just not a lot of
Kelly
talent on
Oubre. Hey,
that.
Kelly Oubre is probably a free agent,
Probably, yeah,
or is he?
yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
probably.
I don't know. I don't have
Um.
to. I literally can't pull up anything on the internet right now. So,
Anyways,
um,
yeah, oh yeah, the internet is down over here too a little bit, slow running slow motion. But
uh,
anyways, I do agree with you, man. I do think that the only reason Miles Bridges is I would like Miles Bridges back on the Hornets just because him and LaMelo Ball had such a great chemistry together and they worked. And so obviously second overall pick, if you can get a Brandon Miller, that would be just absolutely amazing because you'll have, two guys that can handle the ball and that can create for others and that can get their own shot as well in LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. Even with Scoot Henderson, but Brandon Miller just makes ton more sense, right? Position
yeah,
wise.
yep.
So
And
I think with everybody else, Terry
shout
Rozier,
out real
Gordon
quick,
Hayward.
shout out real quick to Stat Smith. Thank you very much for the
Oh
shout
yeah,
out,
too.
man. We appreciate it, man.
Hey,
So
good
go ahead.
looking watching, my brother.
Yeah, we
Hey,
appreciate it, man,
but
for sure.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I do think you go, Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson here, but Brandon Miller first, I think it just fits with the roster perfectly. And then those other guys, see if you can, acquire some, key veterans, some decent veterans, or maybe even some draft compensation for Terry Rozier or Gordon Hayward, in this draft. So.
Yeah, so I think we kind of talked about their priorities for the Charlotte Hornets. Let's move on to the final team. For some reason, I didn't put their record there, but they're the Detroit Pistons. So let's just talk about their logjam at the 4 and 5. Obviously, they traded for James Wiseman. They have Marvin Bagley on this team. They have Jalen Duren on this team. They just have a bunch of guys that all play the 4 and the 5. Like, what do you do to address that logjam? Because all those guys are under contracts that are probably all coming back. What do you do?
So yeah, like you said it, they have a log jam at the front court position. I think one of those guys possibly has to get moved. Like you said, either Jalen Duren, James Wiseman. I don't think you move James Wiseman. I think you traded for James Wiseman. I think he's a guy that you could probably keep both of them. Maybe
I would move Jalen Duren.
interchangeable.
I think Marvin Bagley is out playing his current contract, but if I have the opportunity to trade him and get something of value for him, that's the guy I move. Because they also have
Jalen Duren.
they also have Isaiah Livers. They also have I mean,
The
where's
kid
Isaiah
do they have the
Stewart?
guy that what's his Isaiah
Isaiah Stewart still on this team? So
Isaiah Stewart, yeah, the guy hitting the eyebrow by LeBron.
yeah.
And then so and then talking about and then they even at the guard position, I mean Cade Cunningham, who's Killian Hayes. I mean, you got guys in the front court, RJ Hampton's on this team. I don't know what you do with
Jaden Ivey, Alec Burks, Corey Joseph. I mean, Rodney McGruder is still on this team.
I mean,
they have this is a Pistons team that just has like talent. It just
I don't even know what their identity is.
Yeah, it's true.
What is their identity?
I couldn't tell you, but because Cade Cunningham barely played last season, so it's hard to really say like how good he even is.
What are they good at?
And like I don't know. I mean, Jaden Ivey was really good his rookie season.
No, that's an outlier, like he was good his rookie season, but overall as a team, they have no identity. None of these pieces really work together. I guess we can't say that about Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, but like the rest of the roster just is out of sorts.
I mean, Bogdan
you got to figure out what you're going to do with
there. I think you want to trade him.
Yeah, he's just there. Yeah, so you have to figure out. I think Jalen Duren, you're right. I mean, James Wiseman, like you said, we traded for James Wiseman. He was the number 2 overall pick. James Wiseman is a guy that was has comparable skills to like a Chris Bosh if he can put it together. So I'm definitely seeing what I can get for Jalen Duren, Bogdan Bogdanovic, even the Killian Hayes, right? I'm seeing what I can get from him. They're probably going to get a guard at the 5th overall pick. They're probably going to get Cam Whitmore.
I don't think
Yeah.
Killian Hayes has literally any value whatsoever. Like I literally don't think you could trade him for even like I don't know what you could trade him for. He hasn't played, and when he has played, he hasn't been good. They're like they have the fifth
He's
overall
so
pick.
young though, David. He's so young. He's like
I know
21.
I know he's only like 21, 22, but like so Cam Whitmore is who I had them taking our last mock draft.
Absolutely.
I think that's the kind of guy who makes sense for this team. One of
A
those
front court
versatile
of
wings.
a front court of Cade Cunningham healthy, Cam Whitmore, and Jaden Ivey. I love that backcourt right there. Especially with adding Cam Whitmore, who's another wing there. So then at the power forward, small forward, power forward center position, you're gonna have to figure out what the hell you want to do.
Yeah, you put Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman together. I mean, we'll figure it out.
I think that works. That works.
But I think the priority for Detroit, I think we kind of touched on here, like their priority this offseason needs to be find an identity. Like we don't know what this Detroit Pistons are. Like they continue to acquire talent, but none of it seems to fit and mold and mesh well together. So if this has to be your priority, it has to be finding a fit that works, and not get screwed over by the draft lottery for 3 years in a row.
And Monty Williams is perfect for this job. He is a guy that is great at molding young talent. He's patient. He's a guy that's been to the NBA Finals. He's got success in this league. He's coached Hall of Famers. So I think Monty Williams is perfect for what the Pistons want to do to establish an identity. We already know what Monty Williams is probably going to, preach to this team. I mean, get out and transition and play
energy, play hard.
Yeah, a lot of energy and play hard. So.
But yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. So that's been our offseason preview for every single team in the NBA. We did the teams that made the playoffs. We talked about them as they got eliminated. So keep an eye out for that content. You can go back to our archives and check out that stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of NBA content over the next couple of weeks because the draft is a week from today. Free agency starts in like 10 days. Like there is not that long gap like when it comes to the NFL where there's like a month between the end of the season and the start of free agency and the draft. No, it's like 2 weeks. So we'll see what ends up happening. We're going to be doing our Colts season preview episode tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that content. Coming to you on a Friday. I'm David Huppin. Right there is Mr. Israel Rivera. And Izzy, what do we do here at the Prime, my friend?
We bring the heat, ladies and gentlemen. And go ahead and check us out on all streaming platforms where podcasts can be heard as well, ladies and gentlemen. Bringing the heat 24/7. Prime.
Absolutely. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. We'll be back here tomorrow. We'll see you guys all then. Stay safe out there. Peace out, brother.